first of our debater comedians, Elliot Pallot.
So, this act is slightly less in the musical vein of comedy and slightly more in the cry for help vein of comedy. So, last year, in order to do this, I tried to tell many of my friends, standing up in front of an audience, about a number of times that I have been mugged. They all laughed, and that made me sad. So, this year, I'm going to tell you about the ways that I've tried to make myself feel better about what happened last year, and you know, hopefully we'll avoid the situation again, and I won't have to stand up in another year's time to try and seek validation from strangers. So I think the real trigger as to when I decided that I really needed to find new ways to cheer myself up came when I realised that I'm a grown-up with a job and stuff, and I still go to debating tournaments. And I was standing on the tube, and, you know, it was one of those sort of, like, days on the tube in London, for those of you that know London, where your face is in the armpit of someone that you're fairly sure hasn't washed since, well, Jack Watson won Euros. A joke only the older ones in the audience will understand. Sorry, I am, you know, shamelessly ageist, but only to people of my generation. And another person just decided to force their way into the tube. And, you know, so we're all standing there on our ways to work, various people suited and booted, various people like me wearing more or less what I'm wearing now, and one person, sort of, the guy that just rams himself in right at the end, just says one sentence, and he leaves it at that, and I think he leaves it at that is what really got to me. Do you ever just wonder what we're doing with our lives? And he says it loudly, and he's not with anyone else. I mean, I was already on my way to work. I didn't need an existential crisis to deal with. So eventually I get to work, and, you know, despite the tears, I make it through the working day and I get home. And I decide to think about various ways that I can, you know, sort of perk myself up. And the first thing I do, the first thing I look at is children's television. It was a terrible idea. That shit is fucked up. Right, like, hands in the air if you have seen the Teletubbies, right? Like, yep. You're familiar with the Teletubbies. There is literally a burning baby in the sky. Like, they are burning a baby in the sky. The only thing that differentiates this film from The Hills Have Eyes is they also have a dog that they have combined with a hoover. Like, it is a bunch of various mutated people of different colours who are watching a burning baby in the sky as their god. I find it unreasonable that we are allowing children to be exposed to this as a good way to learn. Quick, guys, here's your hoover, here's your dog, throw them together and see what you can get. So, being then done with English children's television, I turned to Japanese children's television. Perhaps not as bad a mistake, at least not everyone is characterised as wholly good. However, the moment when I realised I was watching one of the good guys from the first two series shove his hand into a person's chest at a show targeted at 5-year-olds, I realised again that something might be wrong. So, you know, at that point I was more or less done with children's television as a source of potential bringing me up. So instead, I decided the only reasonable course of alternative was porn. You know, like, not for sexual gratification, right? Like, that's not the priority, obviously. Mainly for the comments section. You don't even have to watch the videos to, like, understand just how much fun people seem to be having. So I'm just going to tell you about perhaps my favourite ever comment I have found or seen on a porn website. And that comment was, stop. It was dated from 2012. And the comment was, stop what you're doing. We don't have time for this. We need to go after Coney. There which I can think of myself zipper down. And all of a sudden, like, my top priority becomes solving strife in the African continent. Now, don't get me wrong, it's an important issue, but I tend not to conflate these two things together and think of them at the same time. So at that point, I somewhat sort of despaired of finding, good ways to cheer myself up that were not entirely morally dubious. And so I came back to Birmingham to, debate. And, I realised that perhaps validation from strangers is not so bad after all when you compare it to burning babies.